Salutations Rangers, General Rally 101 back at you again with some more lore. And today's Warhammer 40k lore video, ladies and gentlemen, we are taking a look at 5 badass yet unknown dreadnoughts in Warhammer 40k. So strap in and buckle up, and let's get cracking like an owl with today's video. So number 5, we have one of my favorite dreadnoughts and one that is just, it's so good. It's so good for the voice lines alone. Because ladies and gentlemen, we have number 5, Castor the Mad, Castor the Damned, Castor the Ancient, and whatever other title you want to give this big honkin' chonka of a fella. But before he was Castor the Damned the Mad Dreadnought, he was known as Captain Casian of the Second Company, and he was one of the greatest champions that the Blood Angels had ever known, period. He was a master swordsman and was said to be one of the finest duelists that the Legion had seen, and he would be undefeated in battle. However, that was until he was fighting the Eldari. It would be there that he would be cut quite literally in half, allegedly by a Wraithblade, but it is unknown exactly how it happened. Xenos would win the battle and kill most of the Space Marines, leaving Casian for dead. But when the Blood Angels found the battlefield, they would find Casian alive, his sheer will refusing him to die. From there, he would be given the honor of being interred into a dreadnought, where he would serve for a full 300 years. And during this time, he was known as the Fury of the Second for his devastating butchery in melee combat, as he was interred in a Furioso dreadnought. However, this too would come to an end, as while fighting on the world of Lofang, he would fall into the Black Rage. It's unknown how, but it's suggested by the sheer amount of devastation and the way that the Blood Angels died on that devastating world caused him to fall into the Black Rage. From there, he would be inducted into the Death Company, and he would no longer be known as Casian, for Casian was believed to have died that day, and in his stead rose Castor the Damned, Castor the Mad, Castor the Chained, and Castor the Ancient. But his most famous title was him being Castor the Mad, as he could barely tell friend from foe. Everyone and everything was a heretic in some way, shape or form. He only saw it in that manner, and thus he was unable to act. He would still continue to serve, however, for several hundred years after this point, as despite the madness, he was an even more deadly melee combatant. The sheer durability and power that the Black Rage gave him made him into a monster unparalleled, and this would be shown perfectly in the Cryptus campaign. For Captain Cullen of the First Company, as well as a detachment, was sent there to find out exactly what was going on with the people and the populace. For it turned out that they would be afflicted by a massive broodlord, known as the Spawn of Cryptus. This massive and devastating creature was said to have ambushed them, and would have said to destroy the entire world and the First Company elements that were there. However, Chapter Master Dante, knowing this, would have sent Castor to reinforce them, as well as some of the Death Company. Yet, the Gene Stealers and the broodlord would kill pretty much all of the Death Company, with Castor being the last one left standing. Though, Castor, using his massive might, as well as his due power fists, would grab the broodlord and break it over his knee, before being charged by a Carnifex, with its massive talons rending open his dreadnought sarcophagus. But not before the Mad Dreadnought shoved its melter gun into the Carnifex's mouth and blew it sky high. Castor would succeed in killing every single one of the Tyranids that were in front of the First Company, before eventually falling and slumping over, finally giving in to death. However, when the campaign was over, Dante would read the names of those who died, and he'd come across Castors, but he recognized him as Casian. Thus, it was inscribed that both Castor and Casian were the same person, and they both had fought and died on that world, honoring the dreadnought in totality by giving him not only his interred name, but his preborn name as well. For it would be the hope of the Chapter Master of the Blood Angels that Casian's deed would be remembered under both names, both Casian, the Master Swordsman of the Second, as well as Castor, the Fury of the Second Company. So yeah, pretty short summary. For those who don't know, I have like a 20-ish, 30-minute video all about Castor on its own, with like a whole VA acted section of the whole company as well as the book. It's just great. I love it. I adore it. I absolutely love this guy. One of my favorite characters, period, and definitely one of my favorite dreadnoughts, and honestly, a solid entry into number 5th spot. But yep, there you go. If you guys want to learn more about Castor, you can watch the full video, but there you go, Castor the Mad, Castor the Damned, and one of, if not the best dreadnoughts, period, for his voice lines alone, goddamn. But from the Battle of the Tyranids in Warhammer 40k, we move back to the Heresy, as we talk about number 4. And we're keeping in the theme of melee butchers, because we're going to be talking about the World Eaters now. Or should I say, the Warhounds, because we're talking about Venerable Ancient Lork. Lork was a Contemptor pattern dreadnought of the World Eaters. However, he started off as the Warhounds. He would be inducted from Terra itself and be one of the first ever Space Marines of the Legion and of itself. In fact, in the Legion he was known quite simply as the First, as it is believed that he was the first ever brother to be interred into a dreadnought. and laid the first ever dreadnought unit of the Warhounds. Lork would then go on to serve admirably throughout the entirety of the Great Crusade, being a true paragon of the Legion, serving them wholly and utterly, and being involved in the thickest of actions and most devastating of campaigns. And he would be there when the Legion was reunited with its Primarch. But seeing how Angron treated the Legion and seeing the brave Warhounds be slowly turned into the maddened world-eaters of the Butcher's Nails, he would join in the many attempts to coup the Primarch. However, with each one of them ending in defeat, Lork would eventually surrender himself unto the Legion and bend the knee. From there he'd be placed into stasis, until, however, it was well into the heresy. He would then be awoken by a worried Captain Saren, as the Conqueror was being boarded by ultramarine strike elements. From there, Lork would begin to wonder what exactly was going on, and why they were fighting brother legions. Saren, not really able to explain the whole thing, just pointed out the facts, that the ultramarines were killing world eaters, and that was that. So while Lork didn't understand the situation, and had no place in his heart for combating a fellow space marines, his loyalty to his legion was always first. So he was called upon, thus he will serve. Lork would then continue to serve aboard the Conqueror, and he would serve throughout the entirety of the Shadow Crusade. All the while, his disdain for what his legion became more and more apparent. Not necessarily disdain in of itself as in form of hatred, but disdain as in sadness. Sort of a depression as to what his legion had become. But he stayed loyal to his Primarch and to his brothers. However, it would be at the end of the Shadow Crusade, where Angron seemingly would have died and passed into legend. But if not for Lorgar Aurelian, who began transforming Angron into a demon prince. The remaining librarians of the World Eaters, seeing this, would not have it. Thus they attempted to stop the ritual, with Lork himself finally breaking at this seeming damnation and desecration of his brothers as well as his father. He would then lunge forward towards Lorgar and engage him in combat, and he would beat the Primarch handily. Yet as Lork attempted to strike down this evil Primarch, saving his father, the librarians would have failed, and the ascension would be complete. Angron, in a coordinate rage, would split him down the middle, wrenching his esophagus apart, killing him as well as the rest of the librarians, and any world eater that tried to stop it. And so came the end to the first Warhound, born into a shell of iron. Looking at the story of Lork, it's really sad. We see this a lot, especially in Traitor Legions, primarily with the Dusk Raiders, with the Death Guard, as well as the Warhounds and the World Eaters. They get transformed into something else. And we see that the culture of the old chapter, the old Legion, just ends up dying wholesale. And it's really sad to see Lork, someone who really did love the culture of the Warhounds. What they represented, the idea of noble savagery, noble butchery, or, something to hold on to. And him slowly seeing his chapter, his legion, his brothers mutated and mutilated into these butchering, killing machines. To see their own father mutilate his sons and hurt them, and it's a lot. It really was a lot for him. And I really do feel for him, because he tried to stop it, but every time it failed, he still maintained his loyalty to his legion. He was loyal to a fault, and in the end, when he saw his literal father being transformed into a demon of hell, that is what it took for him to finally snap and fight against Lorgar. And it does make you wonder, what would the world be like today if Lork had actually killed Lorgar, if he had stopped his father from becoming a demon and let him pass? What would happen to the World Eaters then? Would the Warhounds still live? Would they have died fighting in nobility? We'll never know. But what we do know is that Lork is the definition of what a dreadnought should be, of what a space marine should be. Old, ancient, venerable, and loyal to the core. And he really just does earn his spot in this place for the sheer fact that it is a tragic story, like all Traitor Legions. But even in the end, his final act of defiance was trying to save his father and protect the kinship of his legion. And in my eyes, that's a very noble thing to do. And again, pretty badass, if I do say so myself. Also, he's the only dreadnought to canonically be able to play poker. So yeah, that's just fucking awesome. But from number 3 of the Warhounds, let's go back to the Boys of Blood as we check out number 3. Alright, so yeah, I know 2 Blood Angel Dreadnoughts in one video, but I wanted to include Castor because, one of my favorites, and also this guy because really important character. So the next dreadnought we're going to be talking about is someone by the name of Moroai, or Moroai the Chosen. And this guy is pretty unique because for the longest time he had the honor of being the only Blood Angel's dreadnought. For those who don't know, there was a point in time where the whole lore of Space Marines was pretty much set in stone. Of course, this was before the Indomitus Crusade, but even before like 7th or 8th edition. You're taking a look at about 4th or 6th edition, that's when Space Marine lore was like really cemented in place. And this is where we get this beautiful chap from. Moroai was the captain of the Blood Angels 4th Company, and he was a very good chap at what he did. Not only was he a venerable leader, but he was a skilled duelist, and all in all he proved himself worthy of the title of a son of Sanguinius. However, it would be on the field of Clamora that he would die against the Eldar. The Eldar seem to have a thing for making Blood Angels captains in Dreadnoughts. I don't know. I mean, look, all I'm saying is that if I had a nickel for every time an Eldar cut a Blood Angels captain in half and made him to a Dreadnought, which then fell to the Black Rage, I'd have 2 nickels. Which isn't much, but it's weird that happened twice. God, I love that meme. Of course, the Sanguinary Priests are pretty good at their job, but they can't exactly put 2 and 2 back together, especially when it's cut open like that. So, Moroai was interred within the adamantine sarcophagi shell of a Furioso Dreadnought. But this was a special type of Dreadnought. This Furioso Dreadnought was actually created by a Master Artificer of the Blood Angels chapter, sometime in its prehistory. It was essentially a relic, for it contained 2 famous blood heroes before him, that being Bellerophon and Amaretto, 2 captains that were also very good at what they did, and were renowned as being exemplars of the Creed of Blood. Thus did many believe that Moroai would join their hallowed ranks as mighty Blood Angels Dreadnoughts that had served the chapter. Small problem though, the minute he got yoinked into the sarcophagi, he got lost to the Black Rage. And the problem was that they already put him in the sarcophagus, so trying to kill him beforehand while he's in there now is kind of a bit of an issue. So basically the Blood Angels are trying to decide what are they going to do with this fellow now. But it turns out that despite being interred into a Black Rage, he was able to retain his sanity. Well, most of his sanity, more than Castor anyway. But it was the idea that maybe it was the sarcophagi or something or whatever happened, he was able to survive the worst of the ravages. He kind of gained this sort of understanding, kind of like the Lamartis, in which he knew that he had the Black Rage, but he still wanted to serve and he still wanted to seek death, not only for himself, but for the foes of the Emperor. Thus, he was given the honor of being the only Blood Angels Dreadnought of the Death Company. Thus was he known as Moroai the Chosen forevermore, for he alone was chosen to be the final living ancient of the damned brothers of Sanguinius' gene seed. And he continued to fight, forward and defiantly, destroying and murdering everything in his path, yet always enduring. And it's noted that even for a Dreadnought with a Black Rage, Moroai is pretty fucking durable, able to take blows that would kill another Dreadnought. Some argue that that's because he may also kinda be working on the vampire juice. For we know that in addition to falling to the Black Rage, he also has succumbed to the Red Thirst. Meaning that if he does not get blood in, he kinda becomes actually like a vampire. He goes a little cuckoo, he goes a little crazy, and just not really that good altogether. And this is on top of him already being mad in the Black Rage, which, double down, my guy. Get that back, my boy? I understand, I get it, but at the same time, goddamn, you really going for the high score. So the Tech Marines of the Blood Angels arsenal have modified him to a point where he can actually ingest blood. As to how, when, where, or why, I don't know. I'm supposed to just pop the top and give him a sip? But if you want to know just how deadly this fella is, well, look no forward to the ForgeWorld of Antax. There a massive orc war was assaulting the world, and the Blood Angels were sent to defend it. But despite the Blood Angels' best efforts to stem the tide, the orc war was just way too numerous. The only way to actually get rid of the war was to kill the orc war boss. But the orc warboss was surrounded by an escort of mega knobs, orcs in power armor, and the warboss known as Gut Stomper would absolutely destroy this world and claim it for the orcs, because the orcs is the best. Or so he thought. Moroai the Chosen would lead the Death Guard personally, and he alone would destroy the mega knob escorts, rendering the bodyguards into pulpy ruin, before proceeding to grab the warboss by both hands and rip him in twain, scattering the orc war and saving the Forge World. And as to what happened to him, we don't really know. But it's assumed that he's still up and about and kicking. But again, we don't really know. And he's from a time of old Space Marine lore. Again, this started in about 3rd edition, but it was really cemented between 4th and 6th edition. Moroai was the only Blood Angels Death Company Dreadnought for the longest time. You had things that did exist, but they were super specific. And a Blood Angels Dreadnought was something that was unheard of. Whilst now in modern times we have a few of them here and there. For a good 3 or 4 editions there was only one Blood Angels Death Company Dreadnought. And that was Moroai. And I just love it because it's what it represents. Not only is it a case of him being super unique as being the only Blood Angels Death Company Dreadnought, it's also the case of what he represents. When you have only one thing, you can show just how powerful it is. And being able to kill a warboss 1v1 and his Mega Knob bodyguard escort just goes to show how terribly powerful a Death Company Dreadnought is. The fact that he also has to drink in blood, if not he goes cuckoo crazy, it just doubled down on that. But for what he represents, for what it means, and for the fact that you have a literal living Dreadnought who's not only afflicted by the Red Curse, but basically acts like a vampire and needs blood, it is super Blood Angel-y. And Blood Angels are known for their Dreadnoughts, and this is a very solid Dreadnought, my boy. But don't worry, this is the last Blood Angel Dreadnought on this list. If not, I'll just make top 5 Blood Angel Dreadnoughts, which, may or may not be a shout. But the next chap we are talking about does indeed have red in his name. Let's talk about number 2. Alright, at number 2 we then have the current High Lord Commander of the Red Scorpions chapter, Carab Cullen, the Risen. Now, Carab Cullen is one of those characters that is super famous in all of Warhammer 40k lore, and this is kind of like a weird little cheat because he's only famous with the old heads. You see, Carab Cullen was a very prominent character in basically much Space Marine lore as a whole, but his model would be discontinued and the whole idea of the successor chapters as individual units as well as individual rule sets kind of went away. Meaning that post-Indomitus Crusade, circa 8th and 9th edition, most people don't really know about him. So this is a case of you never heard of this guy, and if you have heard of him, you're clapping like now because Carab Cullen. The story of Carab Cullen is one of finality, one of completion, and coming full circle as they describe it. He was inducted into the Red Scorpions as an initiate, and he was noted for rising through the scout ranks rather quickly, becoming a fully fledged battle brother in near record time, and he would serve throughout all of the great campaigns of the Red Scorpions. He served in Vrax, where he was sergeant of a veteran Vanguard Space Marine squad. After the siege of Vrax, he would then be raised as the first captain of the first company and command the chapter's Terminator elements. He would lead a very prominent part in the Dab War. However, that wasn't until the Betrayal of Grief incident, where upon the Moon of Grief, the chapter masters of the Red Scorpion would be assassinated under parley. From there, Carab Cullen would be deemed as the first chapter master and the Lord High Commander of the Red Scorpion Space Marines. From there, he would continue to prosecute the campaign and see the end of the Astral Claws and resolving of the conflict, satiating the honor of their slain chapter master. He would continue to lead the Red Scorpions admirably throughout the entirety of the campaigns which they faced, and together with the already great renown won by the chapter, they would continue to rise to new heights. However, it would be during the Indomitus Crusade that he would fight the Great Beast of Sarum, a massive biological monstrosity from the days of the Horus Heresy. And while he would cast the Great Beast down, he would be terribly wounded in the attempt. Thus, what thought to be the remains of Cullen would be returned to the chapter. However, it turns out that the faintest whisperings of life were still there, as he had managed to cling on to life by sheer will alone. From there, the chapter decided that he was deserving of the greatest honor they could bestow upon him, and they would inter him into a Leviathan Dreadnought. The master-crafted ancient artificer technology within the Dreadnought allowed Cullen to live and serve his brother in battle once again. And for a time, Carab Cullen would actually serve as the chapter master of the Red Scorpions while interred in a Dreadnought, and he'd be one of the few rare Space Marines to do so. However, after a century or two of service, the whole Dreadnought sickness would start to claim him a little bit. Thus, he would then leave command of the Red Scorpions by Cabian Sakaios and Sakari and Karagon. It's unknown whether they served either independent terms or they served together. But now let's talk about Mr. Carab Cullen. Carab Cullen was a fan favorite, purely because not only is he a storied character in the Red Scorpions novels, but he is a chapter master dreadnought in a Leviathan. That is such a cool and unique idea, just wholesale, it's amazing. And for the longest time, he was one of, if not the only named dreadnought characters that was outside the big legions. Again, he was a successor chapter. As I mentioned, in between 4th and 6th and 7th edition, like all those early editions before 8th edition, successor chapters were a big thing. They had their own independent rule sets, they had their own unique characters. It wasn't just the core legions of old, it was also these unique successor houses as well. So seeing these unique successors gain so much love and attention towards them, it really did draw a lot of people to them. And again, Carab Cullen is just a fantastic character. He's a compelling character in that, while sometimes he can be quite a hard ass and come off as a little bit uncaring, he generally does care for his boys, and is ultimately a good servant of the Imperium. Not to mention the fact that he's a chapter master dreadnought. That whole idea in of itself was wild back in the day. So again, this is a point where whilst to most of us now it may seem something not that crazy, this was back in the day where such a thing didn't exist, period. The idea of it just didn't exist. So having something like this actually be a thing, and for a successor chapter no less, it made him a really special character that really grabbed at a lot of people. And you may ask, well, Brad, if this guy still exists and this happened during the Indomitus Crusade, why don't new people know about him? And that's because GW discontinued his model. You see, circa 8th and 9th edition, there was a great big model purge that happened, and Mr. Carab Cullen was one of them. Also, GW stopped doing rules for successor chapters for Space Marines, meaning that everything successor related went to Legends. And for some reason, everyone hates Legends, because you can't use them in tournament play. And you know, fucking 40k fans are dirty, sweaty bastards. Motherfucker, I swear to God. But despite everything regarding Carab Cullen and how GW may treat him and how some of the other fans may see him, he is still one of a fan favorite dreadnought for the sole fact again, Chapter Master Leviathan Dreadnought with a siege claw as well as twin assault cannons. What's not to love about this big heck and chunker? Combine that with him being a very storied veteran, the idea of going from a scout to a sergeant to a veteran to a terminator and then finally a dreadnought, slowly but surely getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger before culminating in the literal biggest dreadnought you can get. That strikes a chord with a lot of people, myself included. So all this together, it's no wonder why this guy is a fan favorite dreadnought. And this easily earns him the number 2 spot on our list. But if this massive honking chonker of a dreadnought is only number 2, then what the hell could be number 1? And then finally, ladies and gentlemen, we come to number 1. And this is, in my opinion, the most badass yet unknown dreadnought in all of Warhammer 40k. Or should I say Warhammer 30k, because we're going back to the Horus Heresy, and we're taking a look at Mr. Casian Vaughn. Casian Vaughn, aka Castian Dracos, the fallen master of the Twice Dead and the avatar of the Sacred Flame. This big chunkin' heckin' motherfucker of a dreadnought salamander goodness was the first ever Lord Commander of the 18th Legion, and he's very unique as Lord Commanders go, as he has an unbroken chain of command. From the first time it was founded on its first action on the Tempest Galleries all the way to when it was reunited with its Primarch. To my knowledge, he's the only Lord Commander that's ever done that period to have an unbroken command over the 200-300 years plus of the Great Crusade and Reunification Wars. Casian will serve admirably throughout the entirety of the Great Crusade and the Reunification Wars, leading the Salamanders onto noble deeds, with the majority of their actions being defending the nascent Imperium against a general rebellion as well as Eldar raids, in addition to other Xenos incursions. If someone thought that there was a weak spot that they could strike at the Imperium, the Salamanders would show up to defend it and show them they were in fact horribly wrong. However, this would all come to a head upon the world of Antaeum. With the 19,000 remaining Space Marines of the Salamanders led by the Lord Commander, they would draw a devastating Orc war to them, preventing the rest of the Imperium from being surrounded and devoured by this terrible monstrosity. Here, for an unnumbered amount of days and nights, the Salamanders would fight bitterly and desperately, with Vaughn himself being wounded by the massive Orc war boss, until he would be reinforced and saved by Vulcan, leading 3,000 initiates as well as battle brothers from Nocturne itself, with the great Lord of Drake slaying the Orc war boss, presenting Vaughn with a power claw severed from his terrible arm, fully honoring the chapter master in every single action that was possessed. From there, Vaughn would transfer command of the Legion over to Vulcan, and Vulcan would repay this great honor by forging him a unique suit of dreadnought armor, known as the Dracos Revenant, or the Iron Dragon. Now again, people really sleep on this thing because this thing was made from a unique type of ancient metal alloy found buried deep in the earth of Terra itself. Now we don't know exactly what this alloy was, but it's rumored it was made from the same stuff that the Tempest Galleries was. That's just a rumor, a full rumor that we have no idea is true or not, but it would make sense when it does what it does a little later. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Vaughn would then be known as Casian Dracos. He would continue to serve admirably the Legion under the tutelage of Vulcan, and he would be a sort of second hand of the Primarch, being the first ancients among the Dreadnoughts and being a massive important figure. And during the Battle of Viscera 5, he would lead the charge of the Dreadnought and armor contingent against the traitors. However, when the treachery was revealed and everything was going to shit, he would stand defiantly and outlived every one of his brothers as they were gunned down around him. And even as the Primarch was felled, Vaughn would still stand, and it would only be after being absolutely annihilated by orbital fire that this mighty dreadnought would fall. Into the sands, that is. You didn't think this bastard was dead? No, sir. You see, he would fall into the Urgrel Depression and would continue to search for his Primarch. From there, he would fight against every form of traitor and then be hit by another orbital bombardment, this time severing his limbs, but the actual dreadnought chassis was still there, and he would survive. The great dreadnought enduring throughout everything that was thrown at him for God Almighty knows how long. It's estimated that he was like that for a couple of months until he was found by the Ebon Drake and its crew. From there, the surviving remnants of the shattered legions aboard the cruiser would take Vaughn upon it. And as the Tech Marines attempted to fix what they could of the dreadnought chassis, lo and behold, it would turn out that the metal itself would heal itself and restore the dreadnought to some functionality. It wasn't exactly looking prim and proper, it was still pockmarked and scarred and it didn't really work too well. But his limbs grew back and he was able to fight, which is a fucking massive point that people gloss over. From there, Vaughn would essentially become the de facto leader of this warband, which eventually would be renamed to the Disciples of Fire. And as they begin their traveling and fighting the traitors, something interesting happened with Vaughn. Servitors as well as other automata would basically follow him, forming a pseudo-like court around him. So much so that they would have to be hard programmed not to do that. And even when they were hard programmed not to do that, they would just do it again. And they had to be reprogrammed multiple times. The warband would essentially be heavily influenced by Vaughn, though he didn't do any of this influence overtly, as they began marking their armor in scorch marks and other flaming in symbols. Even those of the Raven Guard and the Iron Hands seemingly did so as well, seemingly also giving up to Vaughn as their new leader. From here they would make their way to the Forge World of Minosa, where they would battle a reclamation fleet sent with a combination of the Iron Hands and the Alpha Legion. The fighting would be bloody and it would be brutal, but eventually the traitors would win the orbital battle, thus forcing the loyalists to make planetfall and mount a defense. From here, Vaughn would be seen by the 3 Norn Queens of Minosa, massive matriarchal magoses, each one of them bound by a massive set of augmented cybernetics. Yet even with this, Vaughn himself still towered over them, and it's said that when Vaughn were to enter their chambers, their Domitar-class battle automata actually backed away and bowed before this mighty lord. From there, Vaughn would then speak with the Norn Queens, and whilst the record of this conversation is lost to history, we do know the result. And that was the 3 Norn Queens identifying Vaughn as the chosen avatar of their machine god, and they would take him into the most deeper inner bowels of the Forge World enough itself, and they would give unto him a unique gift. But said gift would take time, specifically 9 days, which is how long the Loyalist forces were able to hold out against a combined assault against the Iron Warriors and the Alpha Legion, until on the 10th day, the Iron Warrior force was gathered up and sent to attack a massive bastion, but it turns out that this was just a distraction by the Alpha Legion, who was in overall command. They would sacrifice their Iron Warrior brethren and slip in undetected, and doing this they were able to slay one of the Norn Queens, which then caused a massive feedback loop in the automata, which stifled the defenses. But thanks to the brave work of the Shattered Legionaries, they were able to plug whatever holes appeared. And whilst it seemed the traitors were on the verge of success, Vaughn would then show up. The Iron Draco's Revenant would be completely healed and reborn, made proper as the day that Vulcan had crafted it. And it is said that wherever this mighty dreadnought tread, now hailed as the avatar of the sacred flame, every single automata that was before him would rise again and fight. Whether it had been madly deed by the malfiction of the Norn Queen being slayed, whether it had been broken by the conjurers of war, or whether it had fallen into the sleepless aid of a binary depth, all would walk and all would follow the avatar of the machine god. And it's said that somehow he was able to gather over 1,000 battle automata, and he was prepared to assault the Iron Warriors' position. The Iron Warriors raided their makeshift fortress and prepared to die, selling their lives against the bitter fate that awaited them against the Loyalists. But Vaughn simply would not have this. He would walk up and he would speak to the commander of the Iron Warriors, and by some miracle that not even the Emperor knows, he convinced the very stubborn Iron Warriors to join him, to renounce their traitorous ways, as well as to fight against their Alpha Legion. Which wasn't quite hard. The Alpha Legion had treated the Iron Warriors like pieces of shit, and Vaughn was just giving them a hug, so yeah, makes sense to me. From there, Vaughn and the Iron Warriors would absolutely destroy the Alpha Legion force, and whilst their commander was able to escape, his assault force was basically all but destroyed. And him getting away wasn't for a lack of trying, as he was only allowed to escape when his ancient contemptor Dreadnought bodyguard was said to duel Vaughn in a 1v1. And this duel was said to be so titanic, so climactic, so cataclysmic in its proportions, that an entire subsector of Forge was said to be destroyed by these 2 massive dreadnoughts having a grudge match. And after this terrible match that lasted hours, Casian Vaughn raised the broken carcass of his enemy and brake it upon his knees, smoting his ruin upon the ruined floor of Minosa, declaring that now and for always, this Forge World would belong to the Imperials, loyal to the Emperor of Man. And thus the 3rd Siege of Minosa would end, with the Iron Warriors joining the warbound of the Disciples of Fire, and Minosa would become their homeworld, with Casian Vaughn leading many bloody raids and full-on campaigns to Traitor territory, absolutely demolishing though. Because not only is it a unique dreadnought chassis, it is a nigh invulnerable dreadnought chassis, area clean of the foul taint of the heretics. And ultimately his fate is unknown. We don't really know what happened to him, but given his whole story and everything that's about him and the Iron Dragon, I'm just going to hazard a guess here and say that he was assumed by the Machine Spirit, like like his soul went to the Omnissiah? I don't know, bro. I mean, it's fucking metal as shit, though. But now let's talk a little bit about Mr. Casian Vaughn. This guy gets #1 spot easily. It is stated that after the entirety of the use of the Draco's Revenant, its main structure, its main sarcophagi has never been breached. It is made from an ancient alloy that is a pseudo-living metal that can reforge itself. It is the most durable Dreadnought chassis ever created, said to be even more durable than the Dreadnoughts used by the Custodies because it was forged by Vulcan himself. And it's kind of like this venerable Dreadnought Contemptor hybrid, which is just fucking brilliant. Look at this thing, it looks gorgeous. But more than that, it's what the Dreadnought represents. It is said to have a very powerful machine spirit, meaning that only those who have the greatest of wills are meant to cooperate with it rather than subsume it. And also, we need to talk about the fact how whoever is in this Dreadnought basically becomes Lord King of all Automata, and it is powered by the Sacred Flame, whatever that may be. There's a whole bunch of admech nonsense religious rubbish going on here, but hey, it makes sense. This thing is not only the most durable Dreadnought chassis ever created, it has some actual machine spirit Omnissiah nonsense going on with it that means that it's the Lord of Automata as well. Aside from it being fucking awesome and looking amazing, also Draco's Revenant, the Iron Dragon, dude, this thing is beautiful, this thing is amazing, and this thing easily claims #1 spot as the most badass yet unknown Dreadnoughts of Warhammer 40k. I mean, I got nothing to say, bro. I'm just gonna gush about this thing because fuck me sideways. Look at this bastard. It is just mwah. Perfect. Also, the fact that Vaughn was such a Chad, bro had like 25 in charisma, bro. Dude rolled nat 20s for charisma checks like a motherfucker. But yeah, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so very much for watching. Let me know down below what do you guys think about all of these wonderful, beautiful Dreadnoughts. Which is your favorite? Do you guys agree with me? Do you disagree with me? And which is your favorite Dreadnought down below? But I want to say a massive thank you guys for watching. And even more massive thank you to my awesome members and patrons. Shout out to brand new member at the Sergeant tier, Mathwell Merrill. Thank you, my dear brother, for joining and welcome to the Corps. Big shout out to my Officer Corps with Mr. Eddie V3, Miss Majora of the Void. Shout out to my Sergeant tier members, Mr. Damiak, Mr. Andy McGee, Mr. Warsmith the Fireheart, Mr. Corns Butcher, Mr. Bulwin, and Mr. Sean IRL7. Big shout out to my Corporal tier members, Tremail the Math Kitty, Mr. Lord Rosarius, and Mr. Tech Priest Toaster. And finally, but certainly not least, massive thank you to my private tier members, Mr. Thomas Moslons, Mr. Ivan_SVW, Mr. Hattori's Curse, Mr. Monkey Man, Mr. Michael Hayeda, Mr. Diego Castro, Mr. General Alexander, and Mr. Fortus Unum. And thank all of you guys for joining up for my members and my patrons. I love you guys are amazing, it means the absolute world to me. Join the membership and the Patreon, gets a bunch of awesome benefits, it's always my love and affection, but remember, whether give your boy a dollar or not, I will love you just the same. Mwah! Yes, I will. But ladies and gentlemen, I've been the General Bradley 101. Been beautiful, awesome, and amazing people. Make sure you say love there, boys and girls. And I will catch y'all next time. Dismiss, Rangers. I don't care what anyone says, the Iron Dragon is indeed the most durable fucking Dreadnought ever. Because literally, there is so much going for it, you cannot fucking convince me otherwise.